Hey, Father, Lord, again, we just thank you for the opportunity to gather together and fellowship with one another, but also, Lord, that you just use this opportunity to sharpen us and help us to be better servants of you and the assignments that you've given us, Lord. I just thank you for every pastor that's here today and the assignments that you've given them, Lord. I just thank you for their faithfulness and their willingness to grow and to learn and become the ministers you want them to be. So, Father, bless us through this time. Help us to retain the things you want us to know. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Man. Well, I appreciate the chance to get to be in here with you. Y'all already have figured out that Jim is way too gracious. And so whatever expectations you have of this being extraordinary and fun, if we can knock that down just a notch, we might have a shot at it. Jim has always been one of these guys that I've enjoyed being in meetings with. You know, sometimes you go into meetings and you look around and you think, who do I not want to sit by? And when I get an opportunity to sit by Jim, I enjoy it because once in a while, as somebody's talking, we'll say something to each other, and it may not always be encouraging of the moment, but it's certainly pertinent to the moment. So if I see you whispering, I know what you're doing, and that's okay. Also, I get to hang out with Roy Youngblood again. Roy was a pastor in our association for a number of years, and Roy successfully pastored 3 churches in one building. And I will tell you, I never quite figured it out because they were all under the name of one church, but I'm going to tell you, there was multiple agendas. So if you ever want to talk to somebody that knows a little bit about what it's like to work in situations where not everybody's on the same page, Roy has that chapter. And so I'm grateful for that. And also a friend of mine, Charles Boswell, is here. He served here in a couple of situations, or locations would be the right way to say it. And so I was grateful that he could come over. Crime scenes, yeah. And so I always like to know who's in the room with me so I can kind of know what to say, because I understand this is being recorded. And so for posterity, you know, we're going to look either smart or like the other guy. So how many of you room and you're in your very first pastorate? Would you raise your hands? My Lance, look at the number of victims. So we just want you to know that we're praying a special prayer for you, and for the ones that didn't raise your hand, be gentle with them. Don't start showing them your scars or anything like that. But guys, ministry should never be done alone. Now, we're going to talk about change reaction, but one of the things I will tell you is never lead a church through change that you are listening to just yourself, because yourself is not always the best friend in a change. And so you want to have people you trust, that you love, that you know love you and care about you, but can tell you the truth. And so Charles is that for me, and so I'm deeply appreciative of his friendship. And so let's talk about change reaction. Now, let's remember a couple of rules about whenever you read a book. If it's in the Bible, you believe it, you accept it, and you exegete it. If it's not a Bible, you exegete it, you understand it, but you don't immediately just trust it, okay? Because there's going to be things in that book that completely apply to you. There's going to be concepts in that book. Boy, you need to embrace them. Then there's going to be stuff in the book that you're going to look at and go, I don't think this guy's ever been in a Baptist church. That's okay. What I want you to remember is there are nuggets that you're going to find. And I will tell you, 9% of everything I read in this book, I go, oh yeah, sign me up. Here's the best thing I will tell you. No, that's not the best thing. Here's the best thing. The best thing I'm going to tell you is this. If you will learn process for change instead of the announcement of change, you have learned the most important thing I can tell you in this whole thing. Because churches don't like pronouncements unless we paid off the note. They like that announcement. But if you're going to do a change, you want to think process, not pronouncement. So let's get straight into the notes. Now, I will tell you, I gave you 7 pages of notes so that you would not have to write down a lot of stuff that was on the slides. But there's things that we want to be looking at together. So the first thing in preparing for a change reaction is the reaction that this is not working yet. There it is. Okay, so new methods can and must be embraced without altering the church's beliefs or mission. What we have to know is that for the most part, churches believe that when you're talking about change, that you're talking about changing something that for them is rudimentary to who they are. And when a church believes that what you're trying to change is the core of who they are, there is high resistance. So this book helps you distinguish between what is core and what is identity as a church, and what are things that you adjust so that you can be able to help a church move forward. So within that, guys, technology is a blessing, isn't it? Until now. Okay, so one of the best things I'm going to give you is the page numbers the chapters are on. If you look at the table of contents, you're going to notice that in that book, there are no page numbers for the chapters. Now, I don't know if that's so that you'll go look for them, but I found them for you. So if you want to note the page numbers, there they are. But I just found it very helpful. Let me mention this while you're checking a couple of those page numbers. There are books that you do well to read the notes. This is one of those books you want to read the footnotes. Now, they're endnotes, but you want to read them. Part of it is because there's going to be resources that he mentions in those endnotes that you're going to want to have access to. So make sure you read the endnotes. There it is. So this is a guide for pastors, church boards, navigating change. It'll help you anticipate and manage resistance, build consensus, keep your core mission intact. The outcome is a master plan for managing change in the local church. One of the best things about using a book like this is that if you're working with your leaders, it's easier for them to read something and then you to ask the question, what did you think about this? Versus you trying to be the expert announcing something or sharing an idea, and they think it's your idea, and now they've got to talk against you if they don't agree. So anytime that you can put the victim out over on this corner, do it. Let the book be the one that introduces some things, and that's just basic truth. And that way you're struggling with what the book is saying and what y'all think about it, instead of them thinking, I've got to go against my pastor if I don't agree with this. My rhythm is getting, there it is. Okay, so what's the core problem? Change in a church is not optional, it's inevitable. Now, you know that. But you have to know there's people in your church, they're tired of change. They're tired of more people moving in. They're tired of their life has changed. They're tired of the fact there's now a stop sign where there used to be no stop sign or stoplight. They're tired of the fact that they can't get to the donut shop they used to go to. They're tired of the fact that people are going 60 on a road that was 35. And they're tired that you want them to be happy about it. Okay? So, but change is not something you can avoid, especially in a growing community. But it's hard because it can threaten your identity, your comfort zones, because it exposes like a plane. Can we stop here for just a minute? I will tell you that in most churches, as they walk through a change, they underplan, not overplan. And many times people aren't resistant necessarily to the change. What they're resistant to is the transition. What's happening in the transition is where they build their resistance. Now, Jim's got some great resources about managing transitions and some other things that he'll pull and can be able to talk to you about. But I will tell you that very often they don't necessarily disagree with the need for change. They don't like process the changes happening in. So what's going to happen there? Also, it often moves too fast or it can move too slowly. Well, how do you know which one it is? If they're complaining about it being too fast, it's too fast. If they're complaining about, are we ever going to pull the trigger, it's too slow. So you as the manager have to kind of figure out where that's at. And by the way, you can have that exact conversation with two different people at the same church fellowship. So you got to find your way through that river on how you're going to manage the sides of it. But we're trying to help you identify how to deal with the reactions to change as you're going through it with the church. Okay, so common responses, you probably never heard. We've never done it that way before. Some of you have heard, we never did it that way before, and that's what the last pastor found out before he left. Okay? That's called a veiled threat. We tried that once. I'm too tired for this. Let's wait until the time is right. Why fix what isn't broken? By the way, I will tell you that time and again, as we help with pastoral transitions, we find that many pastors spend the last 3 years in their pastorate never planning for what's next. They just plan on how to stay where they are without a problem. Here's this is free. The failure to think about the future, by its very nature, creates a problem in a church. Because if a church doesn't sense movement, if it doesn't sense future, they start grumbling because they know we're just spiraling or standing still. And so I always tell guys, you need to plan for a future regardless. If you're the future with it, you've got to plan the future because the church is owed a future. Because until Jesus comes, there's a work to do. Matter of fact, I was visiting with a pastor yesterday, and he's stymied. He's in his church, a little frustrated, and he made the comment. He says, I just don't know what to do because I'm afraid of starting things in the church because what if God moves me? And so he just kept going back and forth. I looked at him and I said, listen, you need to be careful because you can commit spiritual adultery, which is something Charles Clary taught me years ago, who was a pastor that grew Tate Springs to a huge, huge congregation at one time. He said, Roger, never commit spiritual adultery. Don't lust and look for what's next and miss the one God has told you to be true to. And so if you're in that church as pastor, you're there to help move them forward. You're not there just to help them get a good parking spot. So how is that going to look? Leaders must expect, empathize, and prepare for change. Did that do that on its own, or did you do that? That's fine. I was just so impressed that it read my mind. Okay, so two key ideas on change. Unchanging character, core beliefs, mission, identity, changing methods, programs, structures, how we did things. I want to give you a concept just to kind of marry on to, and that happened in the middle of a counseling moment with a couple I was dealing with years ago that were just very frustrating. You ever have somebody in counseling that frustrated you? They just couldn't yield to what was true. And I threw a quarter, well, I didn't throw it, I tossed a quarter onto the table and I said, how many sides does that quarter have? And they looked at me like I was a slow child and said, 2. I said, no, a quarter has 3. Heads, tail, and the side. And the only way to get a quarter to roll is to put it on its side. And truth is not your truth or his truth. Is somewhere between the two of you, but I've got to get both of you to the middle because right now you're stuck over here. So when you think about change, I want you to think about this. God doesn't change. What he wants that church to be and their identity in Christ doesn't change, but programs and structures have to change, but you are the one that has to help them roll. And by doing change management well, you're helping them get somewhere and not just lay somewhere. Okay? All right. Okay, you're freaking me out now. Are y'all doing this or you're doing? Okay, now I feel so much better. Okay, because I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, gosh, AI is working really good. And trust me, with me, anything intelligent is artificial. Okay, so in the very first chapter, what you're going to see is the summary chapter. You got to remember, this guy teaches like at seminary and at grad schools and things like that. So he's going to tell you, then he's going to tell you what he told you, he's going to summarize what he told you, but it's good stuff. So what he wants you to understand is there's some basic responses to change. One of those is the change reaction to deal with is we don't have a plan for change. And the problem is change is being handled in so many conflicting and disorganized ways that congregants demand a clear and simple plan before accepting change. You know, once in a while, a pastor will say, I'm going to go off to the mountain and I'm going to get a vision. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to share the vision. And I bet you everybody rallies to that vision. And what they find out is they actually came down and there was Aaron with a calf. It'll come to you. Old Testament, it'll show up. Okay, Exodus is the hint. Okay, here's what you have to understand. If you aren't collaborating in creating a vision, then you're missing so many steps to getting buy-in on a vision. People want you to be visional. People want you to have a focus, but what they don't want is to be dictated to. They want you to carry them into the ride. Because sometimes they've had experiences with other people that said that they had a vision, and it wasn't a vision from God, it was just bad pizza. Many times people experienced a pastor's declaration as a frustration with status quo instead of an actual pathway to a better future. And so process is your friend on this. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a few other things. Now, so there's different strategies. One is to listen to and address change reactions. The second is to create a change boundary. We're going to talk about what that means. And then also within that, I push the button. There we go. He gives you the 10 change reactions to look at. The good news for you is I have written them down for you, okay? But I want you to do something for me. I want you to stop for just a moment, take your pencil or pen, and I want you to circle the top 2 or 3 change reactions you've experienced in your own church. Let's just stop for a moment and do that. Okay. Now, who would share one of the top reactions they've received? Somebody share the one of your top 2 or 3. I'll know you're sharing because you're talking out loud. Yes, sir.
Probably, do we really need to change?
Do we really need to change? Anybody else ever hear that? One of yours? Yeah, okay. Somebody else, one of your top 3.
Number 2, our leaders are not good at bringing about change. I hear that often reference about past leaders.
Uh-huh.
So like, hey, they left us and they did this and then they left. And I don't know if that exactly applies to that one, but that's what I hear the most often. Actually,
Yeah.
is
And sometimes
people
what,
leave us after they brought change.
because sometimes people invest in that change and they make the commitment with that leader and then he leaves them, which is, it's like, trust me, stay on the Titanic. I'm going to go on the lifeboat. You'll be fine. Maybe one more.
We don't have a plan.
We don't have a plan. Okay. Have you ever been with somebody on a vacation and they said, what I'd like to do is not plan this? Now, I don't mind spontaneity, okay? I love spontaneity as long as we plan it. Okay? And by that I mean I kind of want to know where we're going. And now when we get there, you don't want to have a plan for that day. Okay. But do I want to get in the truck and just say, let's just drive till we want to stop? I might do that on occasion, but I'm a planner. Okay? I would be described as being rigidly flexible. So I want intentionality with spontaneity, okay? Most churches do better with an intentionality with the freedom to make changes, okay? But not necessarily be something they can't identify. So let's talk about why change is so difficult to manage. Our leaders are not good at bringing about change, and we're going to deal with each one of these objections. The problem is congregations become cynical about change when it's undertaken in an ineffective or disuniting, and by the way, that's a direct quote, manner. And I know that's not a real word, or at least I don't think it ought to be, but it can be, okay. If you write it down enough and then you get rid of that red line below it, I guess it'd be okay. But use it from the pulpit, and an English teacher is going to come up and say, now let's talk. I did an interim one time and in a larger church, and it seemed like about every other week I had a teacher that would come up and say, can we talk a little bit about grammar? And I said, I don't got no time for that right now. But the first time, she thought I actually talked that way. So it took her a while to learn who I am. So why is it so difficult? So let's talk about leaders. And let's go to the next slide. So this will be my cue, right? When I grab this, y'all know to change it. Cool. Okay. All right. He tells the story about his dad. He said, my dad was the head usher in a church where there was 3 services. And in these 3 services, church run about 1,500 people. He had a small group of 18 to 24 guys that he managed. He would greet people. He would connect with people. The ushers loved it. They enjoyed it. There was camaraderie. He said it was kind of like when he was leading a platoon in the Second World War. He said he did it so well that when the head usher over all the services retired, they said, well, who's the best we got? Well, that's him. Let's bring him in. And they moved him from the role in which he was highly connecting and fellowshipping with guys Sunday after Sunday to where he was managing guys. And he was doing operations instead of connections. After a while, he struggled. After a while, they brought some people alongside him to try to, quote, help. Before it was over with, he was asked not to be in that role. And eventually, someone that was alive, vibrant, and faithful in church was out of church because they took away who he was and then embarrassed him on the way out. Didn't mean to, but it's what happens. And so he talked about that to talk about the kind of leaders that are out there. Look and see how well that works. Okay, that was a test. So he talked about the fact, and he used this from a military vernacular. There's strategic leaders, there's tactical leaders, and they're operational leaders. I will tell you, for me, that moment in the book was what I needed because he gave me 3 handles that I've always struggled with, thinking that I knew it innately from being in this so long, but it gave me names, and it really helped. So strategic leaders, and he used a military concept, was in history, there are strategists like commanding generals. They see the board. They see everything. They can see what's happening and what's taking place. In architecture, it's like the visionary that's able to see the concept in their mind that they want to translate into a building. In church, it's the leader that's got church growth eyes. They can see the future. They very often are the first to notice that change is necessary. They are very future directed. Marty said they're extremely sensitive to where people are, but are not content to leave them there. One of the things he talks about, which is so good, is we celebrate the visionary leader. We talk about the need for visionary leadership, and it is the one thing that people talk about when I train past church committees. They'll say things like, especially the larger the church, the more they'll talk about, we need a visionary leader, someone that's highly visionary. There's another kind of leader. It is the tactical leader. The tactical leader in history is the person that not only understands what the visionary leader is wanting to do, but the tactical leader understands how to get from point A to point B. The tactical leader understands how to move the pieces forward. The tactical leader understands the operational side. Very often this is somebody like an executive pastor. They complement the strategic leader. They build in the organization. They recognize the steps. They don't just say, let's start next Sunday. They're like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We've got to do this step and this step and this step. And we got to think about the unintended consequences. In architecture, it's like the civil engineer. If you've ever dealt with engineers, you know. Okay, I know this is on the tape. Does this go to people other than pastors? Okay, then I'm going to tell it. Okay. So years ago, I had a great story that was told me because I think it's true. And I mean, it's not literally true, but true, okay? Metaphorically true. 3 surgeons are sitting around talking about who they like to operate on. One of them says, I love working on plumbers. When you work on a plumber, you open it up, everything's a hand fitting. You can make it work. It's very simple. Another said, no, you're wrong. You want to work on a mechanical engineer. Because when you open them up, everything is color-coded, and there's a schematic, so you know what you're doing. And the third guy says, you're both wrong. Who you want to operate on are lawyers. Because when you open them up, there's nothing there except a tube that runs from their mouth to the fanny, and the parts are interchangeable. May not be true. But the point is, it said engineer. It seemed to fit. Okay, here's what I want you to think about. Engineers don't just simply want to understand what you're saying. They want to understand why you're saying it, why you're saying it now, what the implication is later, what the implication was before. Has there been a demonstration of this? And also on top of that, can you quantify results? And I'd like to have that report by this afternoon. I mean, engineers think different, okay? So when you are working with people with that kind of analytical, many pastors that are visionary go, you're always the rock in my shoe. You're always asking more questions instead of going, thank you, God. You've helped me identify somebody that can actually get this done with me. Speaking of vision doesn't create a vision. You've got to go from the picture to the paint to the drawing. Somebody's got to organize those steps. So they achieve vision in a unifying manner. It's an integrated skill. They know how to pull together the past, the present, and the future. Akoff makes the description of the role of the tactical leader. Said, planning is the design of a desired future, an effective way to bring things about. And one of the nice things that tactical leaders do is they know how to look at a visionary leader and say, not so fast. Now, if there's a fire in the building, we're not going to talk about best escape routes, right? We're opening the door, we're getting out. Most visionary leaders in church create a fire and then say, we ought to get this done, dealt with. And the tactical leader is saying, why'd you light the match? Could we do this different? So he makes a great point of saying this. There are very few tactical leaders in church because we don't celebrate them. There's a lot of pastors that want to be visionary because they're taught to be visionary. Where they need help is tactical. And so I want you to think about if you've got some tactical leaders in your church and what that can mean. The final one is the operational. And the operational guys are like the platoon sergeants. They go from step to step that they are given to do, and they go do it to achieve it and to make this happen. And so they are, well, there's a, okay, I'm going to quit thinking about that. But what I want you to think about is that they are good at building teams. They're good at helping make things happen and move people together. They like to get things done in church. They see church growth eyes. They can see the future. But in that, actually, that's messed up. I will send you a correction on that. That's making me upset. Anyway, the book will fix it. How's that? Okay. Anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And we're sitting in a country that's based upon the concept that operational leaders can make things happen because we just kept moving forward. So I want you to think about in your church about being the strategic leader, being the person that is the tactical leader and the operational leaders. And we'll go to the next slide. The observation is this: strategic leaders are many in the church. Tacticals are lacking. Operational leaders can be promoted to a misfit role. This is very important. If you have somebody that's a very good operational leader, before you promote them, you pilot them before you promote them. This is what I mean. You give them a pilot project to work on, giving them that higher or different type of responsibility with the guarantee, I'm asking you to do this for the next 60 days to 120 days. After that, we're going to visit, and you're going to tell me whether you like this role, if it's a fit, or if you want to go back to the role you were in. You don't promote them, you pilot them. And that way, they have the ability to go back to the other role without them being embarrassed. And if people can learn in our church that we expose people before we commit people, we give them the opportunity to demonstrate before we make them sign in blood that they're doing this forever. Basic stuff. Okay, next one. Here's the assessment. What kind of leader are you? Oh, I guess I really want to make a point on that one. Yeah, let's go ahead. Tactical leaders must be recruited and involved in the change process. Must be allowed to drop their current responsibility to tackle change. That's one thing I'll mention. What happens with people that like to get things done is we often pile more on them without taking anything off of them. Sometimes what happens is they want to pour it on themselves, and you have to say to them, I know you have a huge bandwidth, and I'm grateful for that. But may I ask you what you're willing to step away from for a period of time so you can do this? Because in all our leaders, we ought to be asking them the question, who are you training to replace you? Who are you training to come up alongside you? Because if something happens to you, what happens? So we're responsible for training the next generation. And always tactical leaders do need a rough outline of what you're trying to achieve. So I'm gonna let you do this assessment on your own. It's on page 47. It's a great thing for you to do. I will also tell you, it's a great thing for your spouse to do, talking about you. Because sometimes we answer questions to what we want to be, and we have to be careful about that. So it's good to get other people that know us to answer that for us, to say, this is what I see in you. Okay. I've been asked if there's going to be a break, and the response is eventually. Okay. Now, going to chapter 3. Do churches need change? Now, I know that some of you are tactical, and you've already looked at how many chapters there are. You've been measuring how long it's taken to get through these slides. You've been estimating how late you're going to be. And here's the good news. You're getting out of here. I promise you that. Not every chapter is created equal. And just to arrest your fears, I've just lost 45 precious seconds. But you're worth it, okay? So just stay with me. It's going to be okay. So do churches need change? Yes. Yes, some congregations believe change may be warranted, but it's elusive. Thus, they question the need for it. I will tell you that within that is many times what people are wanting to understand is, why does this matter, and how will this actually help this church? They don't care that it's working at the church down the street. By the way, we didn't like them when they were with us. Okay? This is Baptist Church Growth. So we're just asking, do we really have to be like them? There's a reason we didn't go with them. All right, next slide. All right, North American culture mix. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. All I'm going to say is, for the first time, we have 5 generations worshiping together, and that creates its own situation. Not only do we have multiple generations worshiping together, we have different technological capabilities worshiping together. We also have different social platforms worshiping together. If you think anybody the age of 30 is on Facebook, you have misunderstood the world we're in. They left that multiple generations ago. They do it to tolerate grandparents. And I have churches that are saying, we got on Facebook. I'm going, cool. Okay. Let's talk about what's next. Okay. The character of culture, there is different behavior patterns, different ideas and viewpoints of life, different kinds of products. And this is a very strong anthropological view of this, but every culture group creates its own products, okay? If you were a child of, I was born in 1960, so that tells you I'm 66. Okay, I just turned 60. I just messed with you. Okay, here's the thing. When I went to college, back in the late 70s, the thing to wear was a, what's the shirt that had the little alligator on it? Yeah, the Izod shirt. So you would wear the Izod shirt, and then you would put a button-down shirt on top of it, okay? And then you would wear topsiders, you know, the boat shoes, because in Central Texas, everybody needed boat shoes, right? Okay? And so it was a look. It was kind of a collegiate look. Okay, when you go to colleges now, they don't look like that. But if I'm not careful, what I can do is I can have a topsider, Izod mentality in church, thinking, if you really love Jesus, you'll buy topsiders too. And it creates a tension. Okay, simple stuff. Okay, next one. There's a lot more to this, but here's the simple thing. You have the primary source, which is the Bible. You have the secondary source, which is the pastor or the church person that's communicating to an unchurched person. In that, the goal of our communication is to get them to the gospel. But too often, churches try to get them to a behavior. The gospel will transform them, and the Holy Spirit can conform them into the image of Christ. But if you're trying to get them to a behavior, you're actually making Pharisees instead of followers of Jesus. Next slide. Okay, so when you communicate the good news across cultural divides, we know if we don't speak the same language, we have to find a common way to communicate, or a translator within. Too far. There we go. Thank you for jumping. But the goal of communication in postmodern culture is to understand this, and can I just say this as clear as I can? We've been postmodern Christian for a long time, and people didn't know it. The lost world knew it. But there were still enough saved people that we thought we were becoming postmodern while we were postmodern. And we have long been in that situation. When I first moved to my association in 2004, 97.5% of the students that graduated high school in the Woodlands area went on to college. That has now dropped by another 6 to 8% because the people that have to serve them breakfast now need to live in the area, and they've screwed up their numbers. But there was a real, quote, Christian atmosphere. That's gone. You find it in church, but it's largely not the same atmosphere because of all the people that have moved in. And guys, our association is kind of, different. Roy's been part of it. We go from everything from megachurch to snake handling. Okay? So I literally had a church that when I'm building the pastoral profile, it included that he must own or be willing to buy an ATV and hog hunt. Or you can't be our preacher. And I'm like, well, for some guys, this will be more than what they want in pay. As long as they can hunt your land, they're going to be happy. Okay, but that's not really what they wanted in the Woodlands. Never had that come up in the Woodlands. Okay, so it's just the point is that we need to make sure that we're not just communicating to a lost culture, we're communicating to a culture who doesn't even know who Jesus is. So there are times where we have to be careful about the illustrations that we use. Otherwise, we're going to find out that they don't know what you're talking about. And when you talk about, I thought it was Sarah, and behold, it was Leah, or Rachel, and behold, it was Leah, they're like, what's wrong with Leah? My sister's named Leah. What's the problem? Okay, so you've got to understand where you're at. Okay, next slide. There we are. So with that, communication divide, the behaviors, customs, there's some odd church customs that people don't know if they've not been in church. When I was church planting, especially then and when I pastored San Antonio, I can't tell you how many times I was called father. I didn't correct them. I love reaching Catholics. Man, those folks, when they became Jesus followers, they were the most obedient, faithful people I ever had. And so they won't call me father. Okay. I never gave them a ring to kiss, but I'm not going to correct them. Let's just work together. But the reality is there's behaviors, there are ideas, different views about what is important, different products, the things that come out, whether it's methods or text or expectations. I was visiting with, who was I talking to? Somebody yesterday. Another AMS. He made no. Okay. It was a person on the other end of the phone, okay? I was talking to somebody from the time I left Conroe till I got to Rockwall, because my office is in my, it was another AMS. It was just not the AMS I was thinking about. He told me, he said, I went to a church, they lost power, and we had to do the whole service a cappella. There was silence, it was quiet. He said, Roger, it was just such a blessing to not have the noise. And we talked about the fact that sometimes in Baptist life, we don't have a lot of silence. And other faith traditions do. And there are times where we can learn from others, right? Okay, next slide. All right. So communicating good news, I think we did that one. I know we did that one. And the next one. A boomer church will eventually die but does not reach younger generations. They may know it, but they may not hear you because they didn't get their ears checked. So be mindful of that. African American church may pass away if the community is becoming Hispanic and they don't adapt. By the way, resistance to change has nothing to do with culture or ethnicity is what I should say. It's true across the board. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay, the next slide. Some of this stuff you just got to read, okay? Because I'm looking at the time and the slides. Okay, so he talks about what's the response to this, a multicultural congregation. Here's what I want you to hear about multicultural congregation. Don't try to have the congregation that isn't in your neighborhood. Have a congregation that looks like your neighborhood. So if you're in, I'm thinking of one of the churches I was working with, we're in a partnership with the state of Maine, and we help churches there. Well, when I'm talking in some of those locations, 98.9% of the population is white. I can't look at them and say, well, you're not multicultural. What they would say to me is, you're trying to be, create tokenism. They would say to me, if that Somali brother that relocated here wants to come to church, we want to have a church with them. But we're not going to go out and try to become what our community isn't. But when I'm talking to a church where 85%, and I'm thinking of a church in particular, 85% of a 1.5 mile circle was Hispanic, and they were 42 Anglos wanting to keep having a white bread service. I didn't say that to them, okay? And this is on tape forever. Praise the Lord. Okay. But my point is, when I looked at them and said, why can we not invite the people from the community? Their response was, that'd be okay as long as we just give them their own service. I said, well, the good news is if you do that, in about a year, they can invite you to be part of their service. Because they'll outgrow you fast, because you're on a decline profile, they're on an incline profile, and they didn't like that either. Long story short, after 3 votes, they decided to give us the church, to plant a church in it, which is a thriving Hispanic church. It's doing great because the church now looks like it's community. So let the church be like community. I'm going to let you read more about multi-generational, but we all have multi-generational churches, and it's kind of like having a blended worship service. There's always somebody that's not happy. You just kind of accept that fact. But here's what you know about multi-generational churches. Grandparents love when you're celebrating grandchildren getting saved. And I've seen grandparents tolerate a lot of things as long as they knew it got their kid back in church and their grandkid in church. So the question is it being effective? Okay, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so keys to growing multicultural congregation. I think, well, let me put it this way. Reach out by organizing many sub-congregations. Unify the church by getting the same message to all of them. And then think about identity. And here's why I'm going to come back to this. This is the most critical thing. Ask Jesus who he wants in his church. Okay? Can we have a heart for the nations and understand that if God was good enough to bring them to us, that we need to understand that we once came from somewhere else? None of us, I mean, look, I've got 164th Comanche. Okay, probably some of you also, if you did your genetic testing, it would say something about you too. What I know is this: we're all on land we borrowed from somebody else. That's true of all peoples. Can we not embrace the people God puts around our church? I love them. Okay, next slide. Chapter 4. Some of you saying, but there's still 6 more chapters. Yeah, I know. Okay, so here's what I want you to hear about. God is unchanging in 4 areas. If God doesn't change, why should we? Y'all ever hear something like that? Preacher, my Bible says God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I don't think that we should be different than God. And my response is, well, you don't think you are. It'll come. Okay, so next slide. He took and he asked churches what they liked about themselves. And they listed the greatest strengths of their churches. 15 greatest strengths from all the multiple churches he's worked with. What was interesting is the first strength most people talked about is our church is a caring church. The second is our church is a friendly church. The third most common was our church emphasizes biblical teaching. Now here's what you got to know. When people talk about your church, usually the first thing they'll talk about is the caring relationships they experience. How nice the folks are. And we believe the Bible too. But I mean, it's not that it's not up there, but they start with, am I being received? Okay? The reason I bring that to you is the next slide is The top 9 of these are attitudes and congregational qualities over programs. That's really important to think about, that people want a particular kind of attitude, they want a certain kind of experience and qualities so that they will embrace that. Your programming is helpful, but here's what you need to know. In the words of Will Mancini, that would be lower room thinking. That's about, the place, the people, the program, the pastor. They want to know, do these people love me? When I'm walking and I'm hurt, will they be there with me? When I'm struggling, will they be faithful to me? If something happened to me, would they be there for my family? And see, I will tell you that a lot of times in the ministry side of this stuff, on the pastor side, the staffing thing, we get very focused on the programming. We get focused on a lot of things that actually don't help us move forward. Tweaking times is not what grows a church. Changing hearts is what grows a church. So think of the difference between what is supportive and what is critical. This stuff supports, programming supports. It's a supporting reality. But if they don't think their pastor likes them, it makes a tremendous difference. Christianity Today did a study about 10 years ago, which they contacted 2,500 churches that had new pastors, asked them to rate their preaching. The significant majority of those they contacted said, my preacher is an average to less than average preacher when it comes to proclamation. They went back to those same churches 5 years later, and this is what they found out. In the churches that responded that I clearly believe my pastor loves me and loves our congregation, their preaching has skyrocketed to rock star status. And I have it on, I can prove this. They weren't better preachers necessarily. What it came down to is they knew they were loved. And when somebody loves you as talking, you hear them differently. And I don't care what famous preacher you can name. If you don't think they love you, you'll say something like this. Well, he can preach. He's a great preacher. He doesn't do hospital visits. Not great on funerals. I don't know if he likes me yet, but boy, he can preach. That's not what I want on my tombstone. I'll never forget one time. I was in a church that I had a senior adult leader trying to lead a split. And he did pretty good. There was like 80 or 90 people in his senior adult group. And he got upset with me because I went in and talked to them on a Sunday when he was gone because we were about to have a meeting. I was just doing a check-in when it came to something that we were doing. And I'd heard that there's been some questions. So I said, if you got questions, happy to answer them. And then he called me and said I didn't have the right to go in the class, that I hadn't asked his permission to go into that Sunday school class. And I said, well, I did leave you word that I was going to come visit the class. He said, you didn't ask. You just informed. I said, well, brother, I love you, but you're a military colonel. And on a ranking order, I will tell you, I think I have the right to walk into any class in this church. Well, he wanted to lead a rebellion, and he took about 20 senior adults out. He didn't even get 25% of them. What was interesting, I had a bunch of old ladies that came up to me, literally came up to me and said this, we love, and named him, and we'd like to go with him, but preacher, you do such a good funeral. And everybody that listens to you when you're talking about people at their funeral says, man, he knew them and he loves them. And they said, I'm staying, but I just want to know, are you going to do my funeral? And I said, yes, ma'am, I am, but not for a long time. Hugged them, loved them, because I will tell you, people know if they're loved. It matters. And pastors, if you're a pastor, let me just say this. You love them slowly as you walk through the congregation. You walk them in the hallways. You walk them from the pulpit. And remember that Jesus generally didn't do public correction except for Pharisees. But I don't see one time he corrected an old lady in public. Just a thought. Okay, so next slide. get involved in cohorts. Sometimes guys will say, well, I'm in the season of life where I don't know that I need a cohort. Things are going pretty well. Well, then maybe your role there isn't that you need direct help, but you're going to be there to bless somebody else. Also, I've discovered in ministry that when things are going well, the opportunity for them not to go well is coming soon. And so it will show up. All right. Now, let's walk into chapter 6. And guys, some of this stuff, I'm just going to kind of skate a little bit because you've got a book to read, all right? But let me give you a highlight reel. So next slide. So God's pattern of parenting as a mother. Now, okay, let's just be clear. God does not have sex, okay? We have pronoun reference. We know that the Hebrew, there are male, female, neutral. That's not the point. The point is behavior patterns that we would attribute to a mother. That can a mother forget the baby at her breast? God comforts as a mother. God yearns like a woman in childbirth. The point is the metaphor and the picture. The point is not the gender. But what I want you to hear, what he's trying to say is this, is that there has to be differences in relationship that God has in his expression toward us in different times. Part of it's a pattern of mother. Another's a pattern of a father. There it is. We call out to him, Abba, Father. He may discipline us at times. I don't know about you, but sometimes my mother's discipline was harsher than my father's, but that was just in my house. But that caught up pretty good. Then sometimes, next slide, father and mother. He describes in multiple tones. And then the final slide on that one, God as a parent, it gives you the breakdown of the different types of expressions that are part of that. What he's really trying to get to is this: God's pattern of working with us like in parenting, which is change from pattern of parenting. The application is that we don't waver from underlying principles. I mean, my dad used to say this. He said, Roger, you're going to have a lot of friends. You got one father. And if we become friends, that's great, but I will always be your father. And so I'm grateful I had a father. And I'm grateful we became friends, but I'm grateful he was my father. So there's underlying principles that don't change. Remember, someone that we used to quote, Rick Warren, said, I still quote him, truth is truth, because he got it from somebody else too. Methods are many, principles are few. Methods always change, principles never do. And that's just the way God is. God does not change, but his methods with us can change. So we might need to make some adjustments. We need to be careful that we're always biblical and regular and evaluate our boundaries, that we're staying true, and that we do things in a humble way, slow and copious amounts of prayer and Bible study. I will tell you there's a difference between you trying to help a change happen in your church and you go to the scripture so you can proof text your change, versus going to the scripture so that God can change your heart so you're ready to help them toward the change. And it's kind of like once in a while I had to look at a pastor and saying, you're way too excited about church discipline. Because if you understood church discipline, you would be crying with me, not gleeful. Until it's breaking your heart that this has to happen, you're not ready for the conversation. Okay, next slide. So how to create statements of change boundaries. He calls this the SCB. Now, what he's saying is that you go with your leadership and you work out the elements of here's what we know about God that's not changing. Here's the core of who we are as a church that's not changing. But here's where we can make changes. Here's where our methods have to change. There was a time, believe it or not, where people did not like PowerPoint in church. They didn't like slide projectors. Matter of fact, I can remember, some of you may be old enough, we had a slide projector. And when I first came to our association, I found 4 of them. I said, oh, look, the museum has proven true. We even had an overhead projector. I was trying to figure out what that was for. Now, when we have planters that come in and say, we'd like to buy a projector, we're looking at them saying, no, you want to buy a TV. It's just too much too much easier. Don't deal with that. So there's going to be changes. Next slide. So within that, it depicts the limits, the borders, and the boundaries, and the principles and action by which we create change. Now, here's what I want you to hear. What you're basically saying is we're going to create a document, a framework that we can agree upon before we go at something we're about to change that's significant. By the very nature of doing that, you're bringing people in the room and listening to them, and you're forming this with them so that when you discuss it, they have already agreed to the boundaries. I can't tell you how important that is. Because more than once, I've looked at somebody and said, this is what you told me. And they said, yes, I was there for that. I don't like it. And I'm like, okay, play that back. But the reality is that if they assist with this, then they're more likely to help you in the change. Next slide. So change boundaries is written agreement about what won't change, about our mission, our doctrines, our values. What may change, though, is our programs, our schedule, and our outreach methods. This helps reduce fear and confusion, and protects identity. Here's a rule of thumb. Most of the time, a congregation hears about change way too early and with way too few details. They hear about, we're going to change the worship schedule. But it's the first time they heard it. Listen, if everybody doesn't know what you're about to announce, you're too early. Okay? Let me say it one more time. If everybody doesn't already know what you're about to announce, you're not ready to make the announcement. Because you want significant change to so percolate through the church that people will literally say something like this: I thought we already did this. I thought didn't we already talk about this? I want everybody to look around and go, oh yeah, because I've already talked to the stakeholders, I've already talked to the perimeter, the people the most effective. We've already had round robin and town halls. We've done everything we could do so that by the time we get to, quote, the public announcement, it is not the first time they've heard it, it's the last time they hope they hear it, because they've heard it that much. Okay, next slide. Some parts of the statement could be evolving. It should be reviewed regularly, less than one page. I like that part. Let me tell you where I would deviate from him. He says, post it in the church. Let me tell you, don't do that. Let me say it to you in a different way. Never do that. As soon as you post something like that, it becomes the next bullet for somebody in business meeting, right? I mean, that's the document you roll out to your leadership, you roll out, the congregation understands it, and so forth. But if you make that, here's the thing, Gideon got in trouble because of what? They began to worship what? Okay, Old Testament people. Ephod. They began to worship the ephod that was a symbol of victory, and they elevated it and worshiped it. That's what people do to statements in a church. They'll elevate it to a point of worship. So don't give them one more thing to put their loyalty into. What you want to do instead is to say, here's our guiding principles. Let's elevate the vision God has given us and the truth of who God is. Let's elevate Jesus, but not anything else. Okay, next slide. Okay, so 8 steps. They're all written down for you. But here's the highlight reel. What I want you to think about is how many steps there are before you actually have a document. This isn't something that you go craft and then bring into a meeting and say, well, here it is. This would be a statement that you work collectively so that people have their fingertips on it. And by the way, it should include all the different stakeholders in the church, whether it's the old guard, younger families. It should be a cross-section of the church. But part of the value of that is everybody has an opportunity for a voice. I emphasize, remember, go slowly, because sometimes what happens is the guy says, what I want to do is I want to get this done because I'd really like to announce this by the end of the year, and we're in December. And I'm having to look at them and say, you got to understand the way church works. From November 15th to January 1st, people aren't thinking about church other than what they attend and the party they're going to and the services. But they don't want to write policies in December. So if you missed your date window, that's on you. You've got to push this to next year so that you can do this in a healthy way. Next slide, he talks about stakeholders. That's a good one. Go to the next one. Go slowly, build consensus, and then succeed. And so we're going to go into a slide, the next one, which is how churches change, stages, triggers, and 2 different routes. So let's go to the slide that shows next. Stages are phases or episodes a church goes through. And we're going to be looking at different stages and then the trigger that comes as a result of that step and how to avoid there being confrontation or a incident that becomes a catastrophic event. So we're going to look at path A and path B. Now, here's the other thing I've realized. Y'all have just consumed calories. I did not consume calories so I could stay functional adult. Some of you are already going back to your nap mode, and you're like, you know, it'd be really good just to stop for a moment, close your eyes, and think about the Lord. Okay, just stay with me for just a minute. You can sleep on the way home. Okay, next slide. Route A, and I'm going to walk through these triggers. You have a stage of relative harmony. Overall, things are going pretty good. And then you have what they call the conflicting ideas event. So, for instance, the example they're going to use is that young people came forward and said, we would like there to be another worship service that would use the kind of music that we like. And because we know that this would be taxing on the church, we've already discovered worship leaders and people that be willing to do this, so we don't have to ask anybody else to miss their worship service or to take extra work. We're just going to put this together, which came to the conflicting ideas event. And the problem was that the conflicting ideas event is the people in the church that weren't these people thought everything was fine. They didn't know that there was a challenge. Stage 2, idea development. They bring the idea, and there's what is called a negative legitimizing event. And in this case, what it was is the pastor was overjoyed because he too was their age. He too knew they needed another service. He thought it was fantastic that they had taken the initiative. He thought it was wonderful that they'd already figured out how to do it. And all it was going to take was a small change in the start of the other worship service to be able to make it happen. And they took his enthusiasm as a validator, and the other group that then found out about it took it as he was divisive because he had already sided with that group because he was ecstatic that they were taking that kind of initiative. So we have a change, and they have what they call an alarm event, and that is people began to hear about it, they got up in arms about it, they got concerned about it. And stage 4, surprising, there's resistance. People got upset, they began to push back, and then there's a polarization event which can happen in any business meeting when suddenly people are looking at each other and it becomes us against them. Then there's intense conflict. That's something to look forward to. I pastored a church one time that was 14 years old and had split 2 times in 14 years. They removed 4 families by censure. The pastor before me wrote a 4-page resignation letter that included 2 families that he said had the mark of Korah on them because of rebellion. They had business meetings every month that lasted on average 2 hours. They recorded them, so if you missed one, you could catch up. And very often, they would extend them to the next Wednesday night so that they could conclude them correctly. Okay? What I'm trying to say is they were not very harmonized. Okay? They had been without a pastor 19 months when I got there, and the first thing I heard was, we really don't need a pastor. We have figured out how to do this on our own. Cool. Glad we moved. I won't go through everything. What I will tell you is that about within a year, the business meetings lasted about 12 to 14 minutes because we began to teach them things like, you complain about a committee, you just volunteered to join. And we don't do the work of the committee on the floor of the church. And so I have a deacon and a deacon chairman, and the deacon's resigning, and he looked at me and he said something like this. He said, "It's no fun around here anymore. We used to be able to say anything we wanted to say, and then we go get ice cream." He said, "You've told us that we had to act in such a way that if a lost person was sitting here, they'd want to get saved by the way that we conducted our business. And that takes all the fun out of this." And I'm just looking at him. His best friend is looking at him like, "You're saying this out loud." And all I can think of, I want the tape because the great right throne judgment. This is a good moment for me. And so he just said, "So we're leaving because we're going to go somewhere where we can have like we used to have it." And I said, "We're going to miss you. But we're not going back to that." And we went from over 200 people coming to business meeting to less than 20 because we were boring. And we just got it done and moved on, okay? Didn't do a lot of things right, did that part right. But here's the reality, is that resistance happened. There's a polarizing event where people choose sides. Conflict gets more intense, and then people begin to justify themselves. You remember, some of you, if this is your first pastorate and you think, God bless them, how did they not avoid that? You haven't pastored long enough. Because you're going to have somebody who's going to take your best intent and turn it into the spawn of Satan before it's over with. And all you wanted to do was pray a blessing on the children at the baby dedication day. But you changed the prayer that had been prayed over children for the last 40 years. And you want to wing it. Okay? All stuff I've watched happen in church. The stuff I can say out loud in an audience that is taped. Okay, so then there is a descending harmony, there is no harmony, and then there's an exodus, okay? Somebody's leaving. Okay, how do you get out of that? Well, you have relative harmony, you have conflicting ideas, you have a change, but you bring it into a process, and then you have a legitimizing event where somebody's coming forward wanting to do something. As a pastor, you're very careful. You don't get overly excited. And sometimes that's hard because you've been praying for this. You're hungry for this. You want to say to them, "I have prayed for the last 6 months about this." I literally had one of those moments, but I can do this because I'm a DOM. I don't have to be highly competent. But I had a pastor, I was out, it'll come. Okay, I had a pastor that came to me talking about another multi-site, and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what I think." And I pulled out a map and I showed him a star on it. I said, "I've been praying for a church in that area for over 10 years. So what I think is, thank you, God, for answering the prayer while I'm alive." He goes, "Would you come talk to our group about that?" I said, "Sure, I'll bring the map." Because there are sometimes you just want to say, "This is of God." But there are times where what you need to say is, "This is a really interesting idea. I can see where this could be helpful, but I know that we need to be mindful of everybody in the congregation. So let's get our leadership together and let's talk this through." Because I will tell you what will happen. People will walk out if you're too excited and they'll say, "The pastor said this is the best idea he's heard all year. The pastor said he's glad that somebody finally sees the future. The pastor says finally somebody is going to help us move into the 21st century." And if you don't think that happens with well-meaning people, you've not pastored long enough. Did he say you can't touch it? I mean, as long as history, there's always been half the truth creates the problem. So anyway, so seek permission, move ahead slowly. By the way, move ahead slower than they think you should to make sure you catch the people that said yes to the meeting, but they're not sure in the parking lot. Okay? Don't ever, ever have one of these critical meetings and get out of the parking lot first. You delay, you're turning off lights, you're just checking on things, and you're coming out and saying, "Well, boys, how talking about hunting or whatever you're talking about." And I look at people and say, "What y'all think about that?" I'm still trying to figure some of that out. I don't say, "Man, that's the best idea I ever heard. I might be thinking it." I'm just fishing because I want them to give me the objections they didn't give me in the meeting. Folks, we're supposed to be as smart as serpents and as gentle as a dove. We need to be smarter and be very careful. Listen, get outside help. Listen, yeah, okay, good, cool. Okay, so Route B, I've already covered Route B, except for go back, I know. On the, no, one backwards. Yeah, I know. I get that way. Forward. Cool. Okay, on harmonized event. I'm just enjoying it. Okay, I need somebody to. Compromise, unity, and diversity. By the way, okay, I'm not trying to be political, okay, but I'm just going to make an observation. We're at a time in our country where people think that they got to win instead of understanding that the American system, if you read and I don't mean you heard of them, actually have read the Federalist Papers, what you would know is our Constitution was set up purposely for conflict that required compromise. That's how it's set up. And so it's not supposed to be my way or the highway. It's supposed to be our way, and we share the road. Now, some will get a bigger lane than other lanes and so forth like that, but we get in impasses because we forget the nature of our system is there has to be compromise for functionality. Sometimes we elevate a change to doctrinal level. And by the way, you can do that with attitude. You can do that with the way it's presented in the pulpit. You can do that by saying, we're just going to do a study on how God's people move forward. Ergo. Okay, there's lots of ways you can do it. What you got to be careful about is not ever elevating something where it's not supposed to be. It's not who Jesus is. It is we don't want to have flowers on the altar. It's not the same thing. Okay, next slide, we're there. And then we go to we don't have dissonant harmony and we have group retention. Now, does that mean we will never lose people? No, you're always going to lose people. Listen, 10 to 15% of the average church has people ready to be somewhere else. They're just waiting for a legitimizing event, or they're waiting for a legitimizing moment or situation that can explain it. So you're going to lose people. By the way, I don't care. I promise you, before the crucifixion, somebody said about Jesus, he's just not approachable. Somebody else says, well, I'm not getting fed. Okay, you can fill in the blanks. Some of you first-time pastors are going, what have I signed up for? Okay, the good news is God has lots of blessings for you. And here's what you need to know. When you go through a hard moment, look for somebody else that's already been in a hard moment, because 2 Corinthians 1 is true. We go through suffering to help those that are suffering. So we need each other. Okay, finally, there's group retention. Now, next slide. Okay, I see the time. I see that hand. Okay, pace and consensus. Move slow enough for consensus, but fast enough for momentum. How am I supposed to do that? On purpose. But you got to keep moving things forward in a way that lets people stay up. By the way, you may think people are moving too slow, but very few people go to Disneyland and lose their children on purpose. Okay, let me say it differently. You got to go home with who you brought. And so sometimes we need to look at people and say, do we need to slow this down some? And you know, sometimes people, all they want is to be slowed down long enough to feel like they're really heard. One of the things you're going to hear in that book, Managing Transition, which is so good, is he talks about the reality that people have to grieve a change, even if it's for good. Yes, sir.
One guy expressed it to me this way. He said, you've been percolating on an idea for 2 or 3 years. They're at day one.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, we would tell a pastor, however long it took you to get there, you got to give them that kind of time to get there too.
Right.
So you may be ready for wind sprints. They're just taking their first walk. pilot small changes. By the way, you will find that as you lead a church through small changes well, they'll trust you for bigger changes later because they understand your heart. They really believe you care about them and that you're not just trying to take away their church. There's a great book out there called Who Stole My Church? There's plenty of books like that out there. But I will tell you, people just want to know, am I valued? Do you respect who I am? Celebrate early wins. We would say that what you celebrate on the platform is what people will emulate in the pew. So you got to celebrate what you're looking toward. Keep communication open. And by that, it doesn't mean if, okay. No, I'm not going to tell that one on tape. Yeah, I will. I know of a megachurch pastor that has now retired, so it's okay. Not in my association, so that's even safer. But when they were changing their campus to their new campus, and there were some deacons that weren't happy about it, there were about 40 or 50 deacons in the room. He asked them to bow their heads, said, if you're against this, would you raise your hand so I would understand how to pray? And they did, and he went to everyone, leaned down to the deacon's ear, and said, we're going to miss you. I don't know if that's a healthy change process, but he would say, well, look at what we've done. And I would say, look at who you, anyway. All right, but, okay, all right. And if you're trying to guess who that is, it was outside of Texas, but not really. Okay, so next slide. I'll never get asked to do this again anywhere. So thanks, Jim. No, I'm kidding. Okay, training for change. We try change and fail. We'll never be able to do it. Ineffective leadership. By the way, no matter who you are, you always pay for the consequence of the last guy. You always pay the consequence for their memories. So it's really helpful if when you get there, you're patient to listen to their stories. Let them tell their stories. By the way, I thought it was a brilliant D-Men project Scott Willingham did several years ago. He went to a church and he went to the oldest members and he asked them stories about the church. They talked about when there had been tragedy in the church. They talked about all these different things that happened in the church. Then he took those stories and went into the pulpit and used them as the illustration for the message. I mean, with permission. And basically it was this. There's enough story in the congregation to explain its future. This church has always been willing to make changes. It made changes when there was a fire. It made a change when there was a hurricane. It made a change during COVID. This is what we've done. The stories of the past are currency for future. But you have to know their stories. And to be able to say, I talked to Eliza and she told me it's okay for me to tell you, but, when she lost her husband, this church surrounded her in a way that she never thought was possible. And because of what you did, she has 3 grandchildren that accepted Jesus because they said, I want to be part of a church that loves like that. That's a powerful story. Okay, next slide. So going into ministerial training. Okay, boy, here's the thought. When people tell me they're going to ministry and they say, what kind of degree do I need to get? I usually look at them and say, please get a business degree. Please get a degree where you can earn a living because you may need that. The other is because I want them to be competent. Because I will tell you that when a pastor does not understand how to read a financial report, it does not bring confidence into a congregation or the finance team. Okay? So get good training, be competent. If all you got was a Bible degree, and listen how I said that. I wanted to show you what that can sound like. If all you got. But that's layman. Preacher, you just got a degree in Bible. I'm glad you love the Bible. You understand nothing about business. Okay. I'm going to say something. Keith Thomas, one of my pastors, he came out of Cottage Hills when Cottage Hills was booming. He came to a very small church in our association because he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He served that church for a year, made a great impact. And I had lunch with him one day. He looked at me and goes, Roger, one of the things I learned early in life is you don't spiritualize management and you don't try to manage the Holy Spirit. There are management principles that you need to understand that are available. I had a pastor that got upset with me one time because of an article I wrote in which I said the 3 things I want if I go to a desert island is I want my Bible, I want leadership journal, And the third thing is I want a continued subscription to the Harvard Business Review. He goes, that's not spiritual. I said, you've never read it. Because if you read it, you go, Solomon wrote this part. Wait a minute, David said that. Wait a minute, Jesus said that. I will tell you, most good management principles are right out of the scripture. And when you are able to talk to your lay people and quote things that are outside of the Bible and show how they parallel, they're impressed because you can read. Okay, so pastor business person partnership. I'm going to talk a little bit about this next slide. So there's some things that he talks about. Let's go to the next slide. This is what I want you to hear. 4 common fallacies. Business principles don't apply to the church. That's not true. If you go broke in business, it's the same principle as going broke in church. Okay? You can spiritualize it, but it's broke is broke. That's a technical term. Number 2, the pastor is the church expert. Maybe, maybe not. There may be other people sitting there that are stronger in a particular area of church than you are, or a particular management principle. Sometimes it drives business people crazy when they watch you mismanage staff or fail to manage staff, which is the same thing. The pastor's not interested. That's not true. I haven't been a Christian very long. I will tell you that I have taken business people, led them to the Lord, and they have been invaluable in helping me learn basic principles of management and other things. But there's times I'd have to look at them and say, that's not church. Because see, none of these people get a check. They're volunteers. And this is harder than business because I'm managing volunteers. I'm not managing employees. Okay, so I can't talk to them that way, and I won't. Next slide. Okay, 6 steps to building a pastor business person partnership for change. Did I? Yeah, I gave you those. Yeah, okay, they're there. Okay, and by the way, his idea of changing jobs and all that, here's where I would come back to on this. And I was really proud of this. A young man that came in, he had grown up in large churches all his life. And he told me, he said, Roger, I've been called to pastor a small church. So I want to be in a rural community. Can you help me? And I said, yeah. And he wanted to be out of our association because he said, my dad pastors here. I like to kind of be on my own. So I helped him get into a church outside of Waco in a very small farming community. And it ran a couple of hundred. And he came to me and said, okay, I'm about to enter my first 6 months. Tell me what I need to do, what I need to really pay attention to. I said, well, are you sure you want to know? He goes, yeah. I said, okay, here's the best I can give you. Besides, love them, love Jesus, and preach the word. I said, every week, go to where a layman works. If he's the pharmacist, if he's a rancher, if he's a farmer, and ask him, can I come spend the day with you? Would you just show me what you do? Can you help me understand your ranch? If it takes 2 days, I'll be there for 2 days. I said, go live their life with them so that when they look at you, they see somebody that's tried to understand them. What you're going to find out is that pharmacist is one of the best connected people in town because he knows what they're struggling with at home. He knows that their mother's on hospice. He knows that they have a child that's a diabetic. He knows that they have a spouse that's in a terminal situation or a daughter that's recovering from an unspoken trauma. And look at how those people look at him and what he gives them by caring for them in that community, because you do not survive in a smaller community if you don't know how to connect. I also tell them this, if the guy that pumps your gas is Chinese, you should assume he is married to the mayor's daughter. Because everybody in a community this size is connected. And there's no such thing as you were just rude to one. You were rude to a clan. And they don't forget. So try not to step on it. And guys, we're not going to do everything perfect, right? But we can do some things right. Jesus walked among the people. He saw them. He loved them. Of course, they were like sheep without a shepherd. So shepherd well. So get in there, hang in. Let them show you what they're learning. You be part of what you're learning with them. It just makes a tremendous difference. Okay, our next slide. Important caveat, to distinguish between which management principles are relevant and which are pertinent, evaluation by both management leaders and pastoral leaders is needed. So sometimes you just need to have a good discourse. Once in a while, I will sit down with a guy that's in business. Even today, I coach guys that are in businesses, and I'll say, tell me the 3 things you learned in business that have been critical for you. Tell me 2 choices you made that were mistakes that you wish you could do over. And then what would be the one thing that you always wish somebody in ministry understood or you think was important for a pastor to know? And I've heard so much good stuff come out of people's mouths. Or I've heard things that I realized they don't have clarity of why we don't do this. And when I explained it, they go, that's right. Why didn't anybody ever tell me this? So sometimes we walk into the pulpit or we walk into smaller groups and we're not having the meeting that actually helps them understand. Okay, next slide. Chapter 10, stay connected to those you serve. That's really what we're talking about right now. I can't stress that enough. Is you got to stay connected. That's the reason why, like I said, I was on the phone for 4 hours yesterday, and I'll be on the phone on my way to Avenger where I'm going to go hunt for the next 2 hours. Because, and by the way, I'm sitting in a deer stand. Many times I'm texting a pastor, or if it's slow, I'm calling a pastor. Because I don't want a deer to come out because it's getting near, dark, and I don't want to clean it in the dark. So it's like, okay, I don't care. All right, next slide. Organic leadership. I printed that stuff out. This is what I'm saying. We're going to roll through these slides fairly fast. So the first slide is it provides useful designation for church's leadership that are interreliant, connected, organized, and tied to those they serve. What it basically comes down to this. You can't lead people further than you love them. And you sure can't lead them further than they think you love them. And they may follow you for a while, but they won't follow you forever if they don't think you care about them. Next one. Leaders are interreliant about relationships, and we've done that one. Leaders retreats. Okay, next one. Okay. Are connected. Town hall meetings. By the way, I'm not a huge fan of listening sessions. Especially if you're a denominational person. I tell them, I said, that's a death threat when you tell somebody you're going to ask them to a listening session. Because what it is we come, you ask one thing, we talk for 10 minutes, and then we listen for an hour. And that rather get shot. But you can have informal town hall meetings. By the way, parking lots are informal town hall meetings, fellowship halls, informal town hall meetings, potluck suppers, informal town hall meetings. Man, I'm always just sitting there saying, well, what do you think's going on, and how do you think things are going, and what's going on in your life, and what is it that's happened in the church lately that's been a celebration for you? When you think about the best times of this church, what comes to mind? And I'm just pulling stories, listening. Okay, next one are organized. Hello, clear about organizational change and how to do it. If you're not a good organizer, find someone who is that will help you without wanting to usurp you. Some people want to organize you so they can manage you. You're looking for someone that wants to organize and help you and actually bring about the right achievable and chart where you are on the 6 stages of change, which are also in there. Next one, grassroots leaders. They walk the halls. They listen. Years ago, John Maxwell talked about somebody that he was trying to train, and he looked at him and said, when you hit the church grounds, you run pretty fast between your car and the office. And from this step to that step, you need to understand that you're here to walk slowly in the crowd, let people touch you, and for you to listen to them. So, Pastor, please make sure that you aren't so focused on being spiritual or so unprepared that on Sunday morning when it comes time to walk into that congregation, you can't walk slow enough to listen to somebody, find out what happened with their child. I love little kids, man. I did an interim at a church, First Magnolia, about 1,000 folks, great church. But I always was in the nursery and the preschool area every single Sunday. Because I was walking around telling those teachers what a great job they were doing because I believe it. I was trying to tell them how important they were as a volunteer because I meant it. And I would look at them and invariably be able to face say, I want you to understand that I know that the prayers you're praying over this child today will be honored one day when they come meet Jesus. You are part of what's going to bring them to Jesus. What you say matters. So thank you. And I love those little 2 and 3, 4, 5-year-old kids running out to hug my neck. Matter of fact, when we installed the new pastor, and he's doing a phenomenal job. He has fixed so many things the interim screwed up. When he came, and there was an installation service, I was walking in, and this mother called out to me in the parking lot and said, "Oh, please, Pastor, please wait." And I turned around, she goes, "My little girl for the last 4 weeks has been running around this church saying, 'Where is Pastor Roger?'" And I hugged her neck and I said, "Listen, you got a new pastor. His name is Pastor Adam. And he loves you. And you need to start hugging his neck." And she said, "Okay." And I'm thinking, I handed off the best part of this job. Okay. But that's the role, right? Love on these kids. Love their parents. Love who they are. Next one. Okay. In a synthetic world, we can slide past that, because I'm just going to go to the end, which is how to use this book. It tells you how to use the book. Go to the first chapter, the foreword. It tells you how to use the book. So here's my final thought, as I have 45 seconds left, is that this is one of the better books I've read about the change boundaries, about making sure you do the mechanics of change and things like that. I implore you to get in a cohort, to work some of this stuff out, to talk to guys that have been in the game longer that can kind of give you some ideas, because it'll make a difference.